Hey guys, Jared here, CEO and founder of Luminous. This is the Ops Unfiltered podcast. I started Ops Unfiltered because I know what it feels like to be in operations and e-commerce. You're handling every single part of the business. It's easy to feel siloed in. It's easy to feel like you have to find a solution for everything. I hope that by bringing raw conversations from other operators in e-commerce, that you can extract some value and not feel alone. Many of the operations leaders in e-commerce are running into the same problems that you're running into. So I hope that maybe their solutions can be your solutions. Maybe you can feel not so alone in the warehouse, in purchasing, in your supply chain. So that's my hope. I hope this can be valuable for all of you. Let's dive in to have some raw conversations.
Why do you create?
Growing up, I was always like a tinkerer. I think it started with how it works and then over time adapted it to like how it's made. I remember when I was a kid, I built a half pipe in my parents' basement. I designed like the structures and I pitched my dad. I'm like, I want to build this. And I became the president of the fraternity. And it's like, yes, I threw parties and stuff and that was always fun, but I learned a little bit about like leadership. So then I just like packed my car and I moved to Utah.
Why Utah?
It was a good economy to start businesses. Because I didn't have a degree, I couldn't get like an engineering job. So a lot of inbound leads and there were big names calling in like McDonald's and Microsoft and stuff. And I remember one call came in and it was the head of product at IBM. And so I convinced him to give me enough money to buy a computer and then a 3D printer and a SolidWorks license. And he gave that to me. And I was then able to go and start my company out of my apartment.
Are you kidding me? What do you attribute your success to?
Mainly probably because like, I would say
today we have an amazing guest, a fellow Utah entrepreneur, Jason.
Thank you. Are you going to like overlay applause there?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. That's a good point though. All the content out there, all the gurus and all of the, you know, like the click funnels to buy my class or whatever are there's not as many focused on what we deal with.
Yeah. And
they're all marketing and, you know, hack away type stuff versus like the actual setting up a proper supply chain and good operations.
Yeah. Or how about like actually developing a product or building a brand? Like I feel like what goes viral and what most people consume on LinkedIn or like on YouTube, it's all around. It's like, I built my Amazon FBA brand from like 0 to 2 million. Like, here's a screenshot of my results. Like none of his advice typically is relevant in like how to actually build a product.
And can you get past 2 million or your operations messy and you limit your scale?
Exactly.
That's probably the problem.
Exactly. So just to qualify Jason, because I genuinely have a lot of respect for you.
Thank you.
Probably because I understand
too, you know?
I understand what you do.
Oh yeah.
Not like you do, but so Jason is from Klugonyx, and that my understanding of that, it's an end-to-end product development company that brings your ideas to life. Like that's the general pitch. He's the co-founder of Dorai. I would just describe that as like an innovative, self-drying home goods brand with really classy design. That's why I really like it. And he's the host of the Founders Field Notes podcast, which I've been on. It's a blast. And co-founder of Omos Golf, right?
Yep. That's a new one.
Nice.
Very entry-level supply chain in that one. But it's working, kind of.
So that, for, I guess in layman's terms, Jason has a lot of experience from product inception and that whole process all the way into like getting the goods into the warehouse and like starting fulfillment. I would definitely say you're an expert there. So got a lot going on. So I'm super excited to dive into a couple of different topics. I respect you and your career path. And I have a lot of interest in what you do as well. And I think the viewers of this podcast or in these clips are going to find a lot of value. So I want to start by getting behind the psyche of you. So I have a belief that e-commerce and product development in general, they attract like a certain type of person. They're typically like anti-corporate, anti-dress code. Like so every time I see you, it's hoodie, backwards hat, sneakers.
Yeah, it's easy.
So
I don't need to think about it in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
If my laundry's clean, yeah. It's top down in my drawer, you know what I mean? Go to the next shirt in line.
Nice.
Yeah.
So why do you create?
I mean, probably growing up, I was always like a tinkerer, I think growing up, I'd always get something for like Christmas. I would get a Christmas gift and I would take it apart and see what's inside. Like that was something that my parents would get like frustrated with me about it.
Interesting.
But I would always learn so much. And I look back and I think there are so many things that I would have like buckets of guts of stuff that I've had over time.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm very ADHD, like very to a fault, where I have to work on it quite a bit. And I work with like therapists and stuff and, to try to figure out how to control and manage my ADHD. But I think it's like, I've gotten a lot of value out of that.
That's fascinating right there. I don't think that's very common, honestly.
Yeah.
I have a brother-in-law like that. One time he literally took apart a car. Like,
yeah. Oh, I did. I got to
in it.
cars eventually too. Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And motors and stuff. Yeah.
So like what about that is fascinating? Is it just like how everything fits together? Is it like the understanding of how it actually works? Like
how it works. I think it started with how it works and then over time adapted it to like how it's made. And I think looking back to later in high school and stuff when that show like How It's Made came out, I remember looking back and being fascinated with that. Also going to college, I had terrible grades in school and I applied to so many colleges. I was almost like, I'm not going to get into one. Screw it. I got into this school called Southern Polytechnic State University. Engineering school, like 7,000 students, small, honestly, it is like the best. It worked out so much in my favor. I feel like it was the best place for me to be in that part of my life in education.
Why was that?
I mean, for a few things. So when I got to orientation, I didn't know what major to do at all. I had no idea. And I remember sitting in the auditorium and they started like, announcing like, okay, we're going to start moving into the areas depending on your major. And they started listing off majors and I was like listening and they were like mechanical engineering. I was like, oh yeah, that's it.
So you just like,
because I knew I like to take stuff apart and like build stuff. And, I like as a kid, I always took things apart, but also like, I remember when I was a kid, I built a half pipe in my parents' basement. So like I designed like the structure, I designed the drawings and I pitched my dad. I'm like, I want to build this, we have this room. It'll fit in this room. The ceilings are this high. I could build it this tall. Here's the structure. Here's my material list, and this would have been in 8th grade. We moved down to Georgia and, so I think naturally I just always like was drawn towards that. So
it's so fascinating about the education system because like I'm very similar to you. I dropped out of college. I actually never really found.
I dropped out later in college. I did. I got but the thing that was perfect is so like high school and elementary school, middle school. I always remember feeling like the teachers would be concerned about me and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he's not doing well. And it's like, well, I'm not a good test taker because I don't care about the subject matter.
See, I feel like e-commerce and product development, it attracts these types of minds. Like I'm nowhere near that. Like I'm a little bit different, but it's like these really talented individuals, but like there's no way to cultivate it in school. So you just like get bad grades. And you probably thought you were like,
you feel stupid. Yeah. But that's why this school was great is because the classes were very hands-on. You would like go into a machine shop and then you would go in like one of the classes. I remember it was manufacturing technology and they basically went through all the different manufacturing processes and taught about the machinery and like the applications and all that stuff. And I was fascinated by it.
Wow.
And then the CAD classes, learning CAD and SolidWorks and stuff. And I basically pick and chose all the classes that were interesting to me, and they all were the supporting knowledge around building products and engineering products.
Okay, when did you start monetizing your this ability and passion to create?
I the first thing I monetized wasn't development. It was like my entrepreneurial side kicked in when I had this bar. Well, actually, it really started when I was in my fraternity, and I became the president of the fraternity when things kind of fell apart and it was small. And I was like, oh, I stepped up at a young age and like, you
just grabbed power.
And it's like, yes, I threw parties and stuff, and that was always fun. But I learned a little bit about like leadership, because if I could get a bunch of like frat bros to like do charity events and stuff and like raise money and do this stuff, and it's like, well, if I can pay people, then I can, lead people to, make money and do stuff, right? So with that, I started actually, there was a bar we would always go to, and they had a back room, and I would worked out deals with the bar owner that on like Tuesdays and Thursdays and stuff, I would put together parties for the other fraternities. So the other fraternities were paying me to throw parties.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, I can make money I don't need a boss, So that was like my first taste of entrepreneurship. And then it was like my 5th year, and I had like 18 hours left of my degree, and it was all stuff I didn't want to take. And I was like sick of class. Like I was sick of school. I was sick of it. It's like, I mean, I can stay here for like another year and, get a degree, but then I'm going to be like engineering HVAC units, or something like that.
Exactly.
Like that's not what I want to do. So then I just like packed my car and I moved to Utah.
Okay.
Why Utah, right?
Yeah. Why Utah?
It was a good economy to start businesses. And that's what I had read online. And I had a buddy here. So I had one in. So I had a friend of mine moved here, and he was like snowboarding and stuff. And I was like,
what year was this?
This would have been 2011.
Oh, wow. Okay.
End of 2011, going into 2012.
So, well, great decision.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hopefully you bought a house back then.
No, I was broke. I like literally had a Subaru, and I think I had like $3,000 in my bank account.
Wow.
From just like side hustle stuff,
Okay.
But yeah, that was a good move. I got a job at a ski resort and ski bummed it, which is fantastic.
Okay. So you ski bum.
Mm-hmm.
What were you trying to build on the side when you first got here?
When I got here, I was thinking I could make a snowboard company. Oh. So I engineered, which I never got to build. I engineered a snowboard press and stuff.
You're gonna do that one day, aren't you?
No way. not enough. I don't know. I felt like there's a market cap and stuff, but the big thing with it was I enjoyed the process of engineering like a homemade press with like fire hoses and stuff. And
okay.
So that was cool. But that only lasted so long. After I worked at the ski resort, I got a job with Scott Paul.
Yeah,
at Armor Active.
I know of him.
Yeah. So at that job though, because I didn't have a degree, I couldn't get like an engineering job. It would be hard for me to get a job doing that. So I got a sales job, and I would do sales for him.
Wait, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Because I could sell.
In Armor Active, that was a phone case?
It was like let's see, they make like the tablet enclosures that you see outside of meeting rooms, like that, for example. That's like something we would make, the one for where you schedule meeting rooms on and they enclose iPads and stuff. So it was a B2B security enclosures for tablets.
Got it.
Yeah. And he was one of the first movers in that space.
I didn't know you did sales. Wait, so
well, I did sales for a very short amount of time. I did sales for maybe like a month and a half. And then what started happening is these, and a lot of people were calling in, like it was all inbound leads because he got iPadEnclosures.com. So everybody was searching iPad enclosure and he would be the first to pop up. So a lot of inbound leads, and there were big names calling in like McDonald's and Microsoft and stuff. And I remember one call came in and it was the head of product at IBM. And he's like, I need this. And I was like, well, we don't have that, but I can probably make it for you. I went home that night and I still had a student license on SolidWorks, and I CAD'd up exactly what he asked for. And then the next day I went to Scott in the morning and I was like, hey, so this dude called in yesterday, and we like looked him up on LinkedIn. He's like, oh, he's legit. Right. And I showed him and I pulled out my computer. I was like, well, I engineered this last night. This is what he was asking for. Do you think we could like sell him it and like make these for them? And he's like, you did that? I was like, yeah. So then eventually what happened is he realized that it was an opportunity for me to be like an in-house engineer and do custom projects and get bigger customers because of it.
Oh, that is so sick.
So he gave me the opportunity to monetize and be the in-house engineer and create a department and create custom products.
And it's so awesome that it was like, I don't know Scott personally. He seems like a goofy sort of, but like very accepting, giving.
Oh, he inspired me.
Awesome.
So like everybody sees the weird Scott, but I think back to the Scott, he gave me a chance to like really, he gave me a sandbox to learn it and get paid doing it. You know what I mean?
That's invaluable.
Yeah. So I did that for like a few years, and then really I didn't get to, and then let's see, it would have been 2014. He sold that company, and I didn't have any interest in being there after that. Or like really I had already thinking about like, okay, I kind of want to start a product development and manufacturing sourcing business as a service.
What year was this again?
This would have been 2014. So it was like
2014.
Like almost 10 years ago. And that's what I did. So I convinced him to give me enough money to buy a computer and then a 3D printer and a SolidWorks license. And he gave that to me. And I was then able to go and start my company out of my apartment.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And then I would just do CAD work as a service until I over time built like my team.
Okay. So you, and this is what is now Klugonyx.
Yeah.
Today, right. Okay.
Yeah.
What was it called back then?
Klugonyx.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Same name.
Cool.
So I kind of got stuck with it. It's a weird name, but whatever.
Okay. So you take this experience, this sandbox experience of being an engineer, like CADing up people's.
Well, the valuable part is a lot of the stuff we produced was American made. So I spent a lot of face time reviewing engineering files with factories and engineers at factories. So I would get so much free critiquing on my designs and how to design for manufacturing. Yeah. So that was like a free, like another layer of free education.
That is so valuable. As somebody who has actually developed a product, it's
hard.
Like, it's easy to just CAD something up, like a concept, like, yeah, it's this big and the nubs are this big and it could be this material. But like moving that into production, like something that's actually digestible for a factory is a totally different thing.
That was a big valuable part because and also I got extremely fast at CAD. Like I was extremely fast at SolidWorks, and then wrapping my brain around when I have like a drawing or an idea of a product, wrapping my brain about how I'm going to approach that in the 3D world. So the feature tree is very well organized. So I can modify it and tweak it without it exploding and, you know, throwing a bunch of codes and whatnot. So like I started to figure out the order of operations of CADing something and like, manufacturability for like injection molding, metal fabrication, stuff like that.
Yeah. And so like this is a tip that I personally would have for anybody who's trying to launch a product. If you're trying to develop a unique product, if you're not an engineer yourself or like have actual background in like engineering or an engineer like Jason who has taken CAD drawings to production lines, definitely pay somebody to get their advice. Because if you don't, you could be, because the factories, a lot of times they'll just say yes, 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 or like, or they'll randomly say no.
Yeah. I would say, definitely. There's so many unknowns and challenges that you deal with when you're CADing or like you're creating a product when it comes to like the engineering and manufacturability. One of the other big things that I learned over time, because it was at the beginning, it was really just me, an engineer. Over time, I added another engineer, and then I added a designer, you know, and then added project management and, you know, kind of scaled outward like that. But one of the challenges that I realized started to come up later as I grew the business and grew the resources and things started going from development into manufacturing is it's like a game of telephone. You go from a designer, industrial designer, and they go through their process and they're setting the user experience, developing for a specific user. They're, you know, obviously the aesthetic, the color, material, finish, all that, the ergonomics, whatever details that are important to them and important to the client.
They value it so much.
Yeah, and they care, you know, and then it goes to an engineer. Which if they're the right type of engineer, they will do what they can to achieve all those goals that they had as a designer. And then it'll go from that engineer overseas to a manufacturer. And it's extremely probable that you're going to like lose a lot of those details, you know? And I knew that like, you know, from the beginning, I always wanted to add manufacturing and, you know, obviously that was like very difficult to do over time, and I'll get into that. But like, but one of the reasons why I thought it was important is because I didn't want to lose that product that was built with intention down the road when it gets into manufacturing.
I didn't know that was your reason for doing Onyx 360.
Yeah. And the reason why that split off is because I had founded that with a partner at the time. And in doing so, he was over there. So I had the entry, the way to like set up an office over there because he was there. And he moved from Utah to China.
Wow.
So I had the resource there, and I had clients that I knew I could do the manufacturing for. So it was like an easy way to get in.
Did he speak Chinese?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I think it's an overrated skill.
Yeah. And I mean, more and more of the resources in our industry have English speakers too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, he was over there. This is probably this is in 2017.
Okay.
So I was like 3 or 4 years in, 4 years in, I think, since I started it.
And again, to this point, you had just been doing CAD drawings.
Doing design engineering and like, doing the development portion. And we would do it where either the companies we did it for had their own resources to onboard manufacturers, or I had other relationships with people that were doing the manufacturing portion, and I would pass the project off to them. But they would, I would immediately lose what that initial value was. Without having it under one roof, or at least under one like process or, communication standard or whatever. Right. So,
and you genuinely want those products to succeed.
Yeah. And the founders have a vision, and they accept something early on, and they get, they get attached to it. They get prototypes, and they validate what they're trying to solve with those prototypes and stuff. And it's like, and then if you get into manufacturing and they add nasty screws and stuff like that and whatnot, like, and make it, just further away from what that original intention was, like that can hurt their feelings and make it difficult for them.
Yeah.
They're not stoked, when they get that first sample, and they're like, what the hell is this? We're taking steps backwards now. So I try to prevent that. So I went out to China a few times, and we built that office over time, and funneling all of our clients when they got past the engineering over there, sourcing a factory, onboarding factory, working through DFM, while still trying to be as influential as possible through the DFM process without losing control of the original intended product. And that grew. Last year, I purchased the rest of the business from that partners, and I own the rest of that because I also felt...
Sorry, you said last year you did.
Last year, yeah. So we went at it for a while, and everything was fine and everything, but I just felt like I was once again like losing that flow. And then I think what happened is I started to get protective of the relationships that I have with the clients as well. And when we passed it over to the manufacturing team, which was built in a separate entity, I think I was like, and the clients would come back and not be happy with the experience and whatnot, and the customer support and all that. And I was like, the only way that it's going to be done to the standard that I have at Klugonyx and the development side is if I own that side too outright, and I 100%. Leave that side outright. So I made that big decision to do that.
Wow.
So now today,
how has that been?
One. It's been fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I sleep at night again. Like I don't. I'm more confident in what's going to happen down the road, and we're continuing to refine and build, like work on the processes and stuff, because it's like, there's so many touch points, and there's so many opportunities for that to still happen where you like lose the intention of the design, or other problems at the manufacturing level, the production level with, QC issues, all that type of stuff. Like how that is all handled, how it's communicated to the clients, and how we build solutions to solve the problems that are going to come up because you're making a product, right? It's unavoidable. You can't really like avoid problems, is like, that's the most important thing.
Now, so this is getting closer to one of the questions that I want to ask, and about Klugonyx and Onyx. But so I personally, I've seen so many like sourcing and product development guys around, and like it's the same general person, like the same archetype or whatever. They speak Chinese, they've been the sourcing guy for a while, and it's simply because they can interface with the factory in Chinese. So I've seen them launch and fail importing and product development businesses, and I've also sourced and imported products as well.
Mhm.
Why does Klugonyx specifically have such a good reputation, and like, what do you attribute your success to, despite Utah being such a saturated hub for like sourcing guys?
Well, mainly probably because like I would say 30% of our clientele is in Utah. Like I haven't focused on Utah, and I think because it's saturated and I like saw that versus the way we acquire and build relationships with the customers is like we could go to trade shows all over the country and internationally and stuff like that too. But in service wise, I think because we were built with the development side first versus a lot of people work backwards and add development. There's not as much emphasis on the development. 100%. I think that's an advantage as well. Because usually the development's added as an afterthought,
So I had like a fork in the road in my career path where I was doing a lot of sourcing and importing. And my fork was, okay, either I go down this path and go all in, like as I wanted to be like the product development guy. I had all these wacky ideas I wanted to bring to market and I had good sourcing background, or I go the software route. I decided to go the software route just because I think I was a lot more passionate about that. Yet my passion for products and like consumer products and building them stays. But what I can say, like knowing that industry is you have to have somebody like Jason who understands and is genuinely driven by how like a product works, how it's created. And then you have to have the structure of a company where it owns both the pre-production and they also care about post-production. Yeah. Like that.
Well, and a lot of people go where they have a industrial designer, they create designs, and it goes to an engineer, and the engineer and the designer might be disconnected where they're siloed. And it's like that game of telephone. And then it goes to, they find a factory in Alibaba or something, right? You don't know who it's going to, right? Goes over there, and then they have their own perception of it. And they're likely not going to have the original intention from that designer, their thought process of why they did something a certain way and why something's so important, and that stuff will get lost.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And they have to like care about it too, versus just like, oh, okay, go for it. It'll be okay. Just do it that way. It's fine. It'll save $2 a unit, or whatever. Because, in something like, on the e-commerce side and the brand side, like in China, culturally, they're like, oh, make it cheaper, make it for less, sell quantity. When I see a lot more companies moving towards making something that's very premium, it's going to last a longer amount of time. They're okay paying a little bit more for the better packaging, the better materials, the, all those, the extra steps and whatnot to create that premium product and sell it for a premium. And they're also okay with the more steady growth versus just getting something that sells high quantity and likely is going to have a shorter life cycle. You know what I mean?
That's why I'm so pumped about my brand that's going to be coming out pretty soon. It's called Ergo. I've talked to you about it a little bit. It's a high-end baby pet gate brand. But no, I totally agree. And actually,
I just bought a really crappy baby gate I'll tell you about too.
Oh yeah, man. Oh, I can't. Our final sample, final prototype is going to be done next week. But no, I've lived what you were just describing because I do an outsourced engineer, so I outsource him. I found him from Upwork. Actually, really smart guy. Yeah, he used to be the engineer for Rustica, Rustica hardware. Yeah. His name is Ben. A really nice guy. I'm really scrappy in how I develop products.
Yeah. Well, you know enough about the process to be able to manage it.
That's what I was about to say. Like if I didn't have the sourcing background. I would have just gone with Klugonyx.
Yeah, you've done it because carrying it that last like 50%, because like when you have a concept and then like a prototype, that's like one thing. That last 50% is the hard part. And if you could manage it through that, you could solve a lot of those problems I talked about. And if you could communicate and know how to communicate to the factory and know what tools and resources you need to communicate to that factory, like you can solve those problems and do it that way. But it's just, it does take like, you have to go through it and see all the failures that happen throughout the process many times to be able to do that, than what you've done, obviously.
Well, also back to Klugonyx. You guys, at least from, I talked to a lot of people in Utah. You guys have a good rep in Utah.
I hope so.
Why do you have such good? Because
honestly, that's great to hear. I wish I should pay more attention to it. I feel like I stay secluded in my little building. You know what I mean? But that's great to hear.
Yeah. So that's always shocking to me that if somebody in like a high pain industry, so for any of you guys who don't know, developing a product, like you constantly miss deadlines pre-production.
There's so hard.
There's constantly issues. That should be the expectation is like, we are going to run into 1,000 issues. How can we solve this the most efficient way? How do we pivot? How do we that's product development and that's manufacturing. They're like high pain industries. So to have a good rep in those industries is, it's really impressive.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah. It's hard to make stuff, dude.
What do you attribute that to? Because I remember I ran a sourcing agency or is a white glove sourcing division for madeinchina.com. And there's just always issues.
It's fire after fire after fire.
Yeah.
I think the biggest skill is how you handle fires. And that's even something we still work on today is it's not just how do you put out the fire, but also how do you communicate and present solutions about the fire to the customers.
Okay, dive into that.
Yeah, because they're
give me
so
an example?
passionate about their brand, their company, their product. They're stocked out of inventory. That's very important that this gets here on that time to restock, whatever it might be. And when issues come up, and this is something we still work on, the team in China, for example, because they're so blunt. Like, oh, it's going to be delayed. It's going to be delayed 3 months. And that's it, right? And that's an email they wake up to and they're freaking out. What's going on? Why is it delayed?
And they call Jason.
They usually will call. They'll call the U.S. based account manager, right? So they have a person in their normal time zone to talk to, and if that account manager hasn't spent the time with the purchasing manager, the project manager in China that have already had discussions and figured out the root of the problem with the factory throughout the day before.
Yeah, you don't just react with the customer like, oh yeah,
so that's one of the things I'd rather, instead of it going directly to the client, I'd rather go through that communication standard. So actually it's David or Rachel or Larry calling the client and going, this is what we ran into last night. Here's the cause of the problem. This material did this, or, the mold ran into this issue, but they fixed it or whatever. And here's 3 potential solutions. And this is how it can affect your timeline, worst case scenario, but this is like best case scenario. And this is what we're going to do to make sure that it hits the best case scenario. And it's like, if they hear it like that, they're going to receive that information so much different than an email that says, sorry, you're going to be late.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's like, and we are always like putting effort into making sure that that's the type of experience they have. But that's difficult, and how many problems come up. But I think that's an important part of our service, and I take that very seriously.
So I actually at Made in China we did the exact same thing as you.
Yeah.
So we had a U.S. based account rep that managed accounts, and then we had a China sourcing specialist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's good. You got to have both, right?
Yep.
And those two teams need to be like locked at the hip, where they're constantly communicating and know both sides, because usually the US based resource really understands the client, their needs, and has that relationship. And then the team member in China has the same type of relationship with the factory, right? So it's like you need that, and then those two people, when they're communicating, they need to be like tied together.
Okay, I cannot wait to dive in here. So the communication, when you're sourcing products, the communication between the factory, your China team, the account manager in the United States, the client himself or herself, that is difficult as shit.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
In fact, like I built a whole custom software around that for me in China to use. Like, what tech stack do you guys actually use to? Because for those people listening, like the problems that we ran into was there's at each layer. Not only is it going to be a different language, but the data that you show to the customer could have a rule of markup. Like, okay, you can't just like send this. It's got to be marked up 15% for this, or like there's rules and stuff like. So how have you guys solved that problem?
I mean, I would say we're still working on it, right? We are. I mean, WeChat is a very common tool, but there's a lot of problems with WeChat, right? Like, it doesn't have a good data log and like referring back to stuff. It's not what I see as a source of truth. You know, before it was like, okay, if a decision is made on WeChat, then it needs to be followed up with an email to document the decision and make sure that everybody's on the same page and confirmed. You know, so like that's one way to solve it. Communication wise, we're actually switching our team in China and the US team to everybody's on Slack. And it's actually been working out pretty well. And we're basically, we just push them over.
There's
to
no
Slack.
firewall issues in China?
No. And we always thought that was a problem.
Interesting.
And, no, it hasn't been. It's fine. Like it's, I mean, sure, there's a little bit laggy, but it's fine. Like it's not as bad as we assumed it would be. And we also have like, you know, there's VPNs and stuff. There's like ways around that. The other thing we're starting to push on implementing is Asana, which will be more of a challenge with the firewall. But, you know, we've been testing it with our lead PMs and getting them there because we've used Asana for years on the development and basically using Asana for resource management, task management, like all the project management where we're using that software to like its fullest. And that gets it to the point where we pass it off to the team in China. And now what we've been working on is implementing it from that back end as well, for, you know, having it be the source of truth.
Yeah.
And I think over time, and that takes so long to implement a process, especially in China where culturally they like spreadsheets and like, you know, Microsoft folders, and nothing pisses me off more than when I get an email that has a picture of our folder system with an arrow pointing at what folder I need to find something in. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what we've been working on. And then, of course, like Dorai, you know, whole different tech stack. Yeah. Well, now we're using Luminous, right?
Yeah. For Dorai.
Yeah, which Katie's loves it.
Yeah.
You know?
We're super jazzed.
Yeah.
We just started implementation.
Yeah. She's very excited. She talks about it in the operations meetings, and we're starting this week in Luminous.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so do without that SKU vault and stuff, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
All right, we will get to Dorai. So before you even get into that, I again, just because I have a background in supply chain and sourcing and product development, what is like I'll share one of my stories, like failure stories, like super embarrassing or like maybe very serious, like catastrophic that like really impacted you. So I'll share two real fast just to kind of like open it up. And I hope you can share a couple too. I'm sure you have so many.
Yeah. Like this week, I think I can think of. Just kidding.
So there's this. Okay, so first one, when I was new to sourcing and interfacing with the factory and just all the processes that you know more than me need to happen, like, you know, a pre-production sample, you need, and you have to get one so you can compare it to the production sample, like a third-party inspection service. So I bought like 500 blankets for a client, and
were they weighted blankets or?
No, it wasn't weighted blankets.
Regular
it was just like a regular blanket.
There was a craze for those, you know. So I figured.
I have sourced weighted blankets though.
Yeah.
But they just needed a basic printing on it, and they sent the design over. We sampled it, got it, everything looked good. Before they started production, we double, like they sent us a picture, double check, like, yep, looks good. They produced the units. Now, for most people, like there's third-party inspection services. There's a zillion of them, and there's also like factories will do their own inspection.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't use a third-party inspection service, and somehow the factory, not only did they manufacture the completely wrong design, but so this one had been sent straight to the client. We didn't cross stock or do any QC. Yeah. So he opens it up, and it's totally different design.
After paying, importing everything
had all been paid,
and months or timeline, all that.
And I had trusted the factory's inspection, and never did I do that again. Second story real fast is I got $90,000 stolen from me from a factory in the PPE craze. That's a totally separate story.
Oh, yeah. Thankfully I didn't even try to get into that, but I had a partner of mine do that, and it failed. But yeah, I remember a very early problem, one of my first big ones. And it was for a company of a client that is also a friend, which sucks. We made the cash truck pads. They make like the tailgate pads, and they have like, you fold your tailgate down. You have bikes and stuff, and they have little seats that flip up. Yeah. And coolers, and local company, and they're buddies of mine. So this made it even worse. But we did the first production run. And this is before I had a QC team, because I have QC QA in-house as the third party, and we do that now. But this is when I think we had 3 employees over there in our China office. So like, for example, April she would go do the QC and QA, and they have this lock that it locks to your tailgate so people can't steal them, because a lot of people steal those truck pads. And they mounted the buckle upside down and riveted it to the thing and imported them. So we got them all the way here. And
how many?
It was I don't know, maybe like 1,500 units or something like that. They're big items, so thankfully they didn't, it wasn't tens of thousands. But to replace a rivet, and these are like stainless, like heavy duty rivets. We were talking, we have to drill them out and all that stuff, right? So to repair it, we tried 2 methods. One, I had a 3PL that I was working with that was doing their fulfillment, where we would go and do it there. And I set up the process where we would bore out the rivets, flip it, and then put like a binding post and Loctite it and screw it tight. And they started doing them, and they all failed because they weren't tightening them. They probably had lower team members.
And this was your buddy.
Yeah. And so the first fix failed. And of course I'm paying for all the fixes. So I think I spent like 14 grand on that first fix, and that failed. So we're like, okay, that didn't work. So thankfully we then decided, okay, we're riveting these like they did in production. So we needed to find a riveting machine. And if like we're in Utah, there's like, no riveting machines that are like at that level, until we found a boot manufacturer.
A boot manufacturer?
Yeah, like making ski boots. So they're doing all the rivets for the buckles and stuff.
Yeah.
And this guy, he had a small shop, and he did stuff for like, like Burton bindings, and he did like a few ski boots. He was nice enough to let us, he did the riveting for and replaced them all, but there was still like another like 15 or so grand that we spent on that. So I like lost all that money, but we fixed the problem, but at the end of the day too, like the relationship was tarnished.
Oh, the relationship was tarnished.
Yeah, like we stayed friends after that, and we've had other stuff too, but it's like, no, they don't want to manufacture with us. We did design work for them afterwards. And part of that relationship was tarnished was not just necessarily me, because we stayed buddies, but also like some things were said by, the partners and stuff that might have tarnished it at the end of the day. But like, yeah, it was very painful. And I always look back and, hopefully never make a mistake like that again.
But this is, let me tell you that, like, this is why you have a good rep, though, because most companies, like the fact that you did all of that, you actually care about the end result. Most companies would not do that.
Yeah, well, especially like, Chinese companies.
Okay, well, I'll see what I can get back from the manufacturer and let you know, or like, you could do this or this. It would be very apologetic, but the fact that you dove in spent as much money as you needed to fix it. Like that's actually like very, very commendable.
Yeah. And sometimes, and the thing about like getting factory credits and stuff like that is a lot of times can be a good solution. But it's like, it only matters if the customer's like ordering consistently. And because you got to think on the factories end, they're like, they've only placed one order with us, and a lot of times we'll get them to like give a credit and it only benefits them later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, that's always like a hard conversation, but we go and push on it and we'll do the whole dance with I'll send Patrick in. He's my GM over there that I've running it, and like send Patrick in, the PMs, the QC team, purchasing team. And we go in and do the whole push and like, this is what we need. This is how you're going to give it to us and blah, 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 blah. But that only goes so far, but.
So for people listening where some actual takeaways on the nuts and bolts of manufacturing, like a common things that I'm hearing here are like your lessons a lot of time were in pre-production and like the intersection of engineering and manufacturing, like giving CAD drawings to a manufacturer, making sure.
The problem with that one, with that pad, is that was the second production run.
Oh.
Yeah, they didn't make that problem on the first one.
What do you think could have prevented it?
Having like more QC because if it's just April there doing the test, like, I mean, she's got a lot of other stuff to test, like seams and
things can be missed
and stuff. You wouldn't think the factory would mount something completely upside down.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So yeah, that was tough. I remember we FaceTimed with the factory when we were going through the problem with them, and they were showing how they did it, and they literally pulled one up, mounted the buckle, and they mounted it upside down when they were showing us how they did it. And I was like, you did that one wrong. And the guy's laughing. I'm like, you should not be laughing right now.
Yeah. That cost me $30K.
but the good thing is nowadays, like, because like I've hired a very experienced QC leader and then his team, like their attention to detail is incredible. So really the goal is to catch it before it leaves the factory floor. And that's also why we keep the balance payment where the client doesn't pay the balance payment until we go and inspect it, because our goal is always to catch things before. But also if we pay the balance payment too early to the factory, then they have no reason to fix it. And we can hold that balance payment over their head until they repair the issues. So like if we reject it, which it happens, here and there, then they fix it fast because they need that balance payment. And two, we could, solve the problem quickly. And it's so much easier for them to solve it if they just get it back in the line and fix one's item or whatever, depending on what the problem is. But that's a big portion of why we don't see that as often anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah. And some problems are much bigger than others. And the perception of problems are smaller and bigger than others.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like a client that's new, that's maybe never made something, and they have like a 1% defect rate, like that's incredible, right?
Yep.
Especially on a first or second or third production run, like
that's amazing.
That's amazing, right? But to them, they have a customer complain about an issue,
Jason,
and they freak
I thought
out.
We were supposed to get this,
and it's like, I don't mean like I don't want to be harsh, but that's like really good. Now we know that problem existed. It was only 1%, and that's going to go onto our QC doc in the future. So that standard is now part of your normal process moving forward.
Yeah.
So
you're these are all new things, and like especially if you're doing a complex product, like the things that are uncovered, and especially like be grateful it's a low defect rate for that one thing you uncovered. Like it could have been 5%.
Or more, right? Or 100%, like those truck pads.
So I really like that you take full responsibility and you want to from the start to the finish.
Yeah.
And like, for example, when I got that $90,000 stolen from me, that was in like the PPE craze.
Yeah.
Because we were doing like a distribution company at the time. And
doing like masks and stuff.
So we did nitrile gloves, ASTM certified.
I think we did gloves once too, and it got picked up in Europe through customs and taken away.
It was insane. Like we could do a full podcast on that, but like long story short, got $90,000 stolen from me from a factory that I had already done business with. It was in Vietnam, actually. So we won a $300,000 contract with a hospital, and they sent the deposit over to us, and then we wired it straight there, like contract setup and everything. Then like crickets.
They went dark.
They went dark, and he also said like, oh, because he was in this deal, he was kind of like a trading factory, or excuse me, a trading company where he was just like going and doing business with the factory direct. And if you know, like at that time, that actually happened to a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
especially in Vietnam.
Yeah, they had barriers up. They were afraid. Yeah,
and it was like there was a time where ASTM certified nitrile gloves for hospitals was literally like gold. And so that $90,000, I can relate to that responsibility because I saw so many people in that PPE craze, like the people who didn't take responsibility just sort of like declared bankruptcy, and like it was my life's mission the next couple of months. Like, we're going to figure this out. Like, that's gone. It's stolen. Guess I got to make $90,000 as an entrepreneur. And
you can't say sorry, you lost the deposit.
No, there were people like declaring bankruptcy and saying, sorry, like I don't know what you want me to do. I just hunkered down and actually went to $3 million in sales within 3 months, and we made the $90,000 back and more. Fantastic. And we were able to pay them back.
Selling PPE.
Yes. So we figured out a way to actually get a hold of nitrile gloves, not overseas. Overseas was the biggest shit show ever.
Yeah.
But
it was chaos over there.
If you could in California, there were legitimate suppliers that were getting their hands on legitimate ASTM certified gloves. The problem is they're really expensive. They were selling them for, $16 a box. But the factory pricing at that time was $11, $9 a box. So we got into billion-dollar hospitals. And it was just through being honest. Like, hey, I know you're getting pitched about this box of gloves that they're selling for $11 a box. I have something tangible sitting here in the United States, and I can give it to you for $21. Like, and we weren't even price gouging. It was like,
that's reasonable markup.
It was a reasonable markup. Like typically it was like 10% at most, 20. And like that won in the end.
I think that wins.
I relate to that responsibility. And another question I have for you is, one of the reasons why I got out of the product development sourcing game for clients is like, I would take that on so much. And how do you deal with the stress?
I honestly, the biggest thing I do is I trust my team, and just like, if they know if a fire is big enough, they need me, they'll come to me about it. But like, I can't let that all get to me too much. The most important thing to me is like, if a client is in a really bad shape and needs some time with me, then that's what I would focus on. But yeah, I can't let all the little problems get to me.
Got it. So you've kind of put up some barriers.
Yeah, I have like a barrier.
Everything.
Yeah, like for me, it's like the even with like the clients that I've been working with for like 6 years, 7 years, it's like the relationship I have with them is like, we're just friends and have a great relationship. They work with my team, but when we're together, we're not talking about the work stuff so much, We'll talk like strategy and stuff like that, and the e-commerce side with Dorai. So I have like that experience and whatnot. But like, yeah, I think really I've learned to delegate and remove it from my mind and trust that it's going to be okay. Because if I don't, like that little fires come up, and it just is what it is. And when a big fire comes up, I'll step in, but it's not as often. I think my team does a good job of preventing it from being massive fires all the time.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you've been able to like graduate to that level.
I'd say that was definitely something that, people I've worked with in the past, they would get all in on everything all the time, and they were just a ball of stress.
Got it.
And I just couldn't let it. I just never let it get to me. Yeah, it's hard, but I have to let it go.
I just remember carrying around so much anxiety around all of the little things that can happen between manufacturing, and then like
I mean, when you're
the stress
manufacturing
when
1,000 SKUs, you can't do that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how many SKUs. I know we're like probably over that, but still, it's like, yeah, you can't. I would explode.
It's it's funny. I brought the same that same issue into Luminous at the beginning, and I needed to be handling all the counts at the beginning. I needed to be.
You're
front of
learning
line.
and building based on what you're learning.
Exactly,
So
and
I get that. Yeah.
so that was a good thing. In fact, that's like my secret weapon to understanding the market better than my competitors, because I was so in the weeds of all different types of warehouses. And
yeah, especially while you're like literally in that build phase, that is important. Yeah,
yeah. But I've had to learn also how to like put up those barriers. Like, no, we have a customer service team for these things, and this is how it filters, and like that's why Luminous has an amazing, incredible CTO. Like, you have to trust people eventually, and
and they make their own mistakes and learn too, and you have to like let them do that as well.
And they'll also do things some things way better than you.
Oh, totally.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, now I do want to change topics a little bit now that I feel like we've covered Klugonyx pretty well, and like your engineering background, the type of person you are. Like, you're like a gunslinging like engineer, product guy with tons of experience. So now that we've talked through some of the failures, some of the hard stuff, I want to talk about Dorai. You guys are crushing it. I love your brand.
Thank you. Yeah. That's Kelsey, my wife.
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot to dive in.
That was the piece I was always missing, because it's like the back end side of building products I could do all day. I always wanted to start a brand because I saw the service and stuff. Like, I can do that for the rest of my life. Like, I like it and I enjoy it. The building a brand I saw as a way to build something that I could like sell one day and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
Like, so there, that's a big part of the goal. But I never had an idea that stuck until Dorai, and this was in 2017 that I found the material.
So do you attribute that, like the first one that really stuck? Do you attribute that to Kelsey, or
she was the reason why it was able to stick? I found the material, but what I would have done with it would have been like a Kickstarter and made some money, and then but probably lost money at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Okay, that's
versus
so
Kelsey, when I showed her the material and she, did some research on the diatomaceous earth. Her background is in, brand strategy, UX design. And I showed her the material. She did some research. She was like, well, this is natural. It's healthy. It contributes to a healthy home. That's important to me. And she's like a big marathon triathlete type, very health conscious and all that stuff. So it's like, and she had quit her day job and started doing the agency thing. So we saw like, okay, let's start this thing and do a Kickstarter and see what happens. With some convincing, but at the end of the day, she came around when she did the research and believed in the product and the material and what we could do with it, and saw the opportunity that I did. But she's the anal, like, build this perfect brand that communicates to our specific customer, keeps everything consistent and tight. And she takes that very seriously. Even today. And today she's not involved in the day by day. She stepped back and took a day job at Google.
Well, yeah, it's Alicia and Katie.
Yeah. So that, and what happened is that, like, when Dorai started to really grow, I think because it's so important for her, it to be perfect every time. And like, building a business is just not perfect every time. It wear on her a lot.
The operations.
Yeah. Yes. All of it. Yeah. And, but she was like, I just want, and we were also talking about having a baby and stuff, right? Yeah. So like, she's like, well, I'm just going to take a day job. And she got one at Google. I was like, oh, okay, that's an easy,
I'm
easy
just
day
casually
job,
like,
right?
I'll just go.
And she's doing
go to Google real fast.
She enjoys it, but she still acts as like this advisor. But at the very beginning, like, I wouldn't have been able to do the brand, and I learned following along building Dorai what it means to build a brand.
Okay, this is so cool right here, because I feel like a lot of the entrepreneurs watching, even if you have an existing brand, like, understand your strengths and weaknesses. So I just highlight, for example, like, I have to outsource engineering. I might not have to outsource something for the sourcing manufacturing side. And then what Jason was just talking about, like, Dorai without Kelsey and without your cooperation could have just been like a freaking stone that you like tried to sell B2B or something like.
Yeah. And it would have been like fine, but it would never have been what it's become today and what it's growing towards, and then once it got to the point where it was like, like 10 plus million, like really growing in revenue and stuff like that, then it was like, okay, need to hire a CEO because Kelsey stepped back. I can't be the CEO of both. I shouldn't be the CEO of an e-commerce brand. That's not my skill set. Like I'm good at this. I'll focus on this. And I found Alicia on a LinkedIn job posting for a CEO. I got really lucky, and also at the same time, before Alicia came on, I hired Katie as director of operations, who she worked for me at Onyx 360. Yeah. And then a job opening opened up at
Katie's. I love Katie. I love both of them. Yeah. I've interacted more with Katie. But.
Yeah, Katie is like, and she is learning at such a rapid rate.
She's like the gunslinking operator.
And that's what I've learned I have to surround myself with because I'm not that. Like I'm like the leader, set vision type, like I can't sit down and do the operations and keep it organized. I'm too messy.
But by the way, I can't wait to have Katie on the podcast.
Yeah,
like her and I are going to dive into like the nuts and bolts.
Well, she'll have a lot of valuable information, like what she's learned because the amount she's learned from when she started working with me at Onyx 360, that job opened up and she goes, I want that job. I was like, you got that job.
Oh, that's sick. I'm so glad she spoke up.
And it was a touchy subject because she was leaving one company to the other. And at the time it was like, someone wasn't stoked on that, but at the same time, she was like, I love Dorai. I want to, make that my job.
Oh, I love that.
And then her learning really accelerated because she got to like focus on one company, one supply chain, one product line and stuff like that.
Yep.
So yeah, that's been great. So bringing on Katie and then hiring on Alicia, she's ex-Amazon, ex-Walmart. She was at Walker Edison before she came to me. So she had home goods experience and e-commerce, like serious e-commerce growth that company did. And so she had all the boxes checked, but also like personality-wise, she's a leader. She's very positive. She's very people-focused. And she's like just great to work with.
So it comes across.
Yeah. It was really easy, to make that. So I could really like trust them, and I'm like not as involved. And the thing I stay involved with is like the very top line stuff, when it comes to like financials and whatnot and like very high level strategy. And usually a lot of that is more Alicia and I collaborating or Katie and I collaborating versus me saying like, this is how it needs to be done. I could really lean on them to also be a big part of those conversations. And I just focus on like, they're like our tightest and biggest client. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They go through Onyx 360, like the Klugonyx. They are a client to me. They pay.
So cool.
They pay my service business. You know what I mean? Even though I own the majority of both of them, but at the end of the day, it's like I can't run, Dorai, which has now become this monster that would drain.
It's all symbiotic.
It has to pay, and it's like a client. You know what I mean? So, but what that does is one, I get to sit on the same side of the table as my clients that are growing like an e-commerce brand. And,
I bet that's so valuable.
This is what I learned, and they're telling us what they learned, and like we're bouncing ideas, and we have like really rewarding conversations. But also, it's like sitting down with Katie and Alicia and be like, well, what went wrong? What did we do bad? We could like have real and direct conversations about what our service is doing wrong.
Yeah.
And that's like a huge advantage that I have over a lot of my competitors because I get to like literally have a relationship with a client like no one else.
I hope this is okay to bring up, but something that I learned through you guys very recently, talking to Katie. So apparently you've got some mother effing copycats on Amazon.
Oh yeah.
And it was because you didn't file for a patent in China in addition to the United States.
Yeah, really, it's the Sync Caddies, the big one, and that's like just one of the SKUs, and it still sells well and stuff. So I'm glad that we've protected all of our other products at the level we did. And And like,
Look at, can you dive into that a little
Yeah.
bit? Like how would you recommend somebody launching a product if they're very serious about it?
Yeah.
And the go-to-market?
Well, I mean, I get like the patent fortress that I focus on for Dorai is not only super important to me. And like, we try to get utility design patents. We get them internationally. We get them in China. But also I will fight them. And that's what people do not do. They invest in IP and they're like, oh, it's patented. But as soon as someone knocks it off, they're like, oh, it's too expensive. Like, you got to go after them. And I will go after them. You know what I mean? And that's like, mean as that sounds, but it's like, I need to protect what we've built, and I will fight a patent and get out of it what I deserve.
That's the thing. Like, my belief on software versus consumer products is very different on those things, because like consumer products, if you got a design patent because you were the first person to come up with it, or a utility patent that has like an actual claim, and somebody is clearly copying you and monetizing off it. That's why it exists.
And we try to, and that's why like we don't skimp on design processes. And we have a new Scene Caddy coming out that will have a patent that'll be more unique, and it'll be, we've added some value to the original design because we've learned from the amount of customers we had what we need to fix on it. And we have a new version that'll come out that'll be protected. So if they knock that one off, then I'll just go take them out like flies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They can have the old one.
Yeah.
I feel great that we designed that, and that was our design, and people are knocking off. It's almost flattering, you know, but they can have that.
You'll stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, we can. We're going to try to be 2 years ahead on what we have out. Like, and there's a lot of the products that we have that no one will be able to knock off because the utility patents and the design patents and the international IP work that we've done.
Okay, so some advice for somebody who's launching something in a very similar industry, like similar price point. I struggle with even, do I want to sell on Amazon?
You know,
if so,
we did way later in the life cycle. We got to the point where we started selling on Amazon for brand protection, because people were going on Amazon and the search volume for Dorai was so high. We knew that if we weren't the ones at the top of the page collecting on that, then they're going to buy a competitor.
Okay, so it was literally just because like, oh, our brand's getting in, and well, that's the thing, like.
So I wouldn't say start on Amazon. I would say go to Amazon when you need to go on Amazon. And we held out as long as we could. And it didn't kill our bottom line at all, or like or cannibalize our Shopify sales.
Well, what's your pricing on Amazon versus Shopify? Oh, it's the same?
Yep. We keep sales the same pace. Everything follows each other.
So how is your contribution margin on Amazon versus Shopify? Because that was something we already struggled with at Qualtree. Like the Amazon contribution margin was horrible.
It's not, because the shipping is so much more efficient these days. So the shipping's a little bit lower on Amazon.
Also, do you advertise on Amazon?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the customer acquisition cost is lower. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. But it's hard, the amount of data you get out of it, it's hard to know if they knew us from somewhere else and they came through an ad on Dorai or whatever. Did they find us on a meta ad, and then they, the amount of data you get out of Amazon is different. I don't think, like, I hate Amazon businesses, you know, but we're a business that got to the point where we need to get on Amazon and we're missing opportunity.
Got it.
Yeah. And we knew that when we got on, and our Shopify sales stayed where they're at and continued to grow steadily, right? And then the Amazon sales just bolted on top of that.
Interesting.
It didn't cannibalize our sales.
Okay.
It was the rollover traffic, because people that are like serial Amazon shoppers and they see a brand on like a meta ad or whatever,
they go straight to Amazon.
They'll go look, and if it's not on Amazon, they'll find something similar. But the thing is too, is it's like, because we differentiate as much as we can, you know, like I think that gives us an advantage that people, if they go on Amazon because they feel safe buying with Prime and stuff like that, they'll do that. There's trade secrets and advantages that we could apply to protect ourselves in other ways at the manufacturing level. Like if a factory in China finds something difficult to do for a specific product and you say, no, we want to do it, and you're willing to pay for the extra, that is another barrier to why they wouldn't want to knock you off and do that for someone else. They would rather find the easier, cheaper way to do it for someone else, and they can have it.
Yep.
So like, I think innovation and engineering can also help protect a product.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we move on from Dorai, like as you know, as a client of Luminous, like Luminous is, our thesis is the modern e-commerce brand, which I think Dorai is a great example of that. They hit complexity markers really fast. And my stance is like, a lot of times, like the evolution of e-commerce company, it's a relatively new thing. Like how you go omni-channel, when you go omni-channel, when you start selling wholesale, when you start, if you're handling the whole process, et cetera, et cetera. My whole stance is always, you don't have to go to NetSuite. You don't have to go to Acumatica, Dynamics 365, like these massive systems. Like, what are specifically some of the complexity markers that Dorai hit from the first time it hit, the goods hit the warehouse and you started doing fulfillment? Like, when did things start to break where you're like, oh man, God, I need ShipStation, or wow, now I need SKU Vault?
I think we started with a 3PL when we launched, and we did that for, let's see, maybe the first 2 years of the company, right? And we would see like a lot of issues and stuff like that, but then also we noticed like how much it affected our bottom line with the extra fees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I took the leap of getting to getting our own warehouse, which is the one that you see. So we took that leap, and I was like, okay, like I really think this is going to add to the bottom line. I would say it didn't take us. We didn't really figure out the warehouse efficiently until about 8 months, like a year in or so. I think we figured out by the time we hit our first Black Friday in the warehouse.
What software did you use? Like from
so that was the thing. We knew ShipStation because my buddy Chandler, who had helped in various. He's kind of like a jack of all trades. He always helped, like even back at Armor Active is when I met him. He worked there. He would work with the shipping and stuff. He worked at Wolfgang, the collar company. They make leashes and stuff. And he did, dealt with shipping and stuff there. So he came in to help me, which was helpful because he knew like, okay, ShipStation, at the time we were using a combination of ShipStation and Shopify for inventory, which is bad. So that was messy. Then Katie started, and so when Katie came in, that was one of the first problems she was able to tackle. She worked with Chandler, and at the time, the warehouse manager we had then, and they shopped around for various softwares for warehouse management. And yeah, I think really we just ended up with SKU Vault because out of the options we had, and we didn't even want to, but it was like really, we didn't have many options. The pickings were slim, and it just made the most sense for us. But later we the challenge we ran into were like bundles. Always a big problem.
This is like right here. This is actually, so Luminous. I'm so curious with the complexity markers that brands run into. We have a whole thesis. We fundraise on this. Join luminous.com. So what the biggest thing that I noticed with Dorai is what a lot of e-commerce companies don't understand is the intersection between your inventory management system and your order management system matters big time. ShipStation doesn't handle bundles, or they don't.
No, not well.
And also SKU Vault, they have bundling, but they don't have like a data auditing tool, and the way they do
it's buggy. And we've had to fix a lot of things. Like we'll have a big sale and there'll be like a bundle, and this goes out of stock during that sale, and then like it screws all this up in the bundle, but the bundle keeps going and it oversells and all this stuff. Over time we figured it out. Like Katie's figured it out. She's and honestly, it's to the point now where I don't even know what our full tech stack is. You probably know more.
But that's the thing. Like operators like Katie, this is like, it's these conversations where it's like she was using SKU Vault and ShipStation. They were supposed to be doing X, but she what she had to do, she just had to hack everything together to make it work.
The connection of all the platforms were not seamless now, and they weren't fluid. And I feel like there's a lot of one-way communication between the platforms versus, everything syncing together properly. And they figured out ways to like, okay, this is going to happen. We need to flip this off at this time, and we have this many units. Setting plenty of excess stock to prevent, stock outs and whatnot for like
unnecessary stock outs.
Yeah. Like all those things that they've figured out over time, and a lot of it had to be manually done. And I know they, in the marketing and the sales and the operations meetings that we'll have, like, those are the things that Katie and Maddie, our VP of marketing and stuff like that, they'll sync up about that type of stuff on the fly and know, like, we're getting close on this. Let me know when this happens, and then I'll do this. And they have to do these things and actively do it live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way.
It's a really common problem. And so I can't wait to have Katie on, like, because we can dive into like the nuts and bolts of that, and it'll be a freaking blast.
And her experience is like round up, where we started with the bare bones of a Shopify, and then
dude, I'm actually doing I'm with the launch of Ergo, my brand, my Babygate brand. I'm going to do a series like where basically I'm documenting from the standpoint of a back-end system. Like, here's what I did, scrappy entrepreneur, to build a product, and like all of the phases from project management to purchasing to like, I'm especially trying to identify the points where you make a technology decision. Yeah. And I want to lay out all of the competitors, break them down when it's relevant. And then obviously the end goal is like, use Luminous for all this, but not everything though.
Well, and like going through the demo process and the questions you're asking and all that type of stuff, like, do you solve this problem, and prioritizing problem solving? Because like NetSuite's like, oh, we could fix everything. And it's
exactly.
Like, whatever. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's like, you have to prioritize your problems that you're solving for, and know that, and that's what we had to do with SKU Vault. It's like, know that it's not going to solve everything. But like the problems it does solve for now outweigh the smaller problems, and we can adapt to the small problems for now until a better solution comes in.
Like with a system, it's so funny, like bringing it all back at the end, like just like you said, in your product development process, you just need to be curious and put out fire as well, and like actually listen. So it's the same thing in software, and especially I would say in Luminous, with the clients that we service, it's the same thing. It's most software companies, a fire comes up and they don't really listen to your feedback. They, like, just, oh yeah, well, yeah, you could do this or this if you want, or maybe they eventually fix it. But like with Luminous, we have that genuine curiosity on like, how can we be the most flexible, easy to use system on the market for the modern e-commerce brand? And
that's the advantage of software too that I've always seen. Like I'm not a software guy whatsoever, and I think that's probably why I'm stuck in the hardware, right? Like software is so I'm just not good with it. But the advantage of being fluid and taking advantage of it in that sense is what makes good software. So,
well, actually, a good example. This will be really fast. A good example is like Katie. We're in the welcome call, like discovery process before we get like everything going. She highlighted something as we were just auditing a process that SKU Vault actually did well. That she really liked. It was the way that they handled inventory deductions directly from Amazon. And it was something that actually we didn't have, and like we took that immediately. It's in our next sprint. So like before That's Luminous even goes live for you guys, like those are the types of things. Like I'm curious with the whole market. Like we want to create something that has the least amount of friction possible.
Yeah. Where anybody can jump in and use it. Yeah, because there are a lot of. I mean, when an e-commerce brand starts, they have to be extremely scrappy, right? Like there's not many e-commerce brands that are like funded like, tens of millions of dollars or whatever. Like most of them are scrappy like Dorai had to be. Cause like Dorai still was only raised 120 grand in funding. Like it's never, like I've never taken on funding. And that was in 2019, right? So we've stretched that until now, right? And with that, we've always been scrappy, right? And a lot of times with that, the team members you're bringing on, like Katie, she's never dealt with any of those problems, and she's had to figure it all out herself. And if the software, like, there's no way she could have taken on NetSuite. You know what I mean?
That's why I'm so anti NetSuite, is because it pisses me off that they're going down market so hard, because
they hit me up on LinkedIn all the time.
Well, dude, even just so I'm in Utah. I'm decently well connected among the brands, and every brand that's gone to NetSuite, they're either in a lawsuit with them or they have the same story. Man, we ended up paying $300,000 extra. And it's like still not work. Like
it's literally the thing that would have been hard for Katie. She would have figured it out, obviously, but the problem is that she would not have been able to do anything else we needed her to do. And those are the types of hires that these e-commerce brands are bringing on. They're bringing, people with operational experience, but it's not like, I'm not hiring someone that's, $300K a year, have been operating e-commerce for 15 years, like you're bringing people on and that they're going to come in and have to learn with the growth of the brand. And the software needs to be able to work for that customer and that person in that role.
Yeah. And NetSuite doesn't build with this concept of like what you just described. Like we're a young company, like it's just Katie and me and like this one gunslinging guy that's helping. Like, dude, NetSuite doesn't build with the idea of the modern e-commerce brand in mind, and they don't build with this idea of friction. So for example, like, I need to fill this order. Well, guess what? NetSuite, you gotta there's 16 steps you need to take. In Luminous,
I've never even seen NetSuite. I don't even want to see it.
Oh man, it's like, yes, it's true. It can do whatever you want, but the point of Luminous is removing the friction. So so instead of 16 steps in NetSuite where you have to custom code and pay an engineer $15,000 for your picking process. In Luminous, it's like, how can you take that 16-step process, remove the friction, but still give high-level visibility to Jason?
Dashboards are great. That's all I can look at. I can only look at dashboards. Dashboards and P&Ls.
So, by the way, we're running out of time. This is my last question for you. I'm really curious, actually, something that I know you and your wife went into business together. How has that been, doing business with her? What have you learned?
Definitely. We learned a lot about each other. It's definitely been easier as she's taken a day job. I think now that she's more removed and I'm still pretty heavily involved, it's, the conversations we have now are more productive, where she'll be like, okay, I saw this. And then I'm able to understand what she sees and what she sees as being something that needs to be fixed or whatever, from a brand perspective or whatever. Right. And then I can go in and then help, advocate and whatnot. And I think she's seen me do that, and that helps with everything. But yeah, there's definitely challenges, but there are some good things about we learned, just like we built a business together and now we're building a family together. I feel like we understand each other's working styles, and that's been helpful, and we know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging, but what marriage isn't? And also there's this sense of it's this sense of attraction with her, because I watched her get scrappy with me and do that, and I mean, she went from making San Francisco money to quitting a day job and starting this brand with me.
No, that's love.
Well, and she really grinded it out and was so passionate about it, and I love that about it. And one day, we can sell that brand or liquidate it, and we'll always look back to what we built together, and I think that'll be special.
I also want to say, I think it's probably y'all's superpowers that you can you're out of it where you can give like very high level product and engineering advice, like, and especially your V2 and V3. And then your wife can also, like, she can give high level marketing advice, and you have competent CEO and operators. Like,
I do like,
it's really cool.
well, so the things that Kelsey pays and gets involved with from like an advisory standpoint now is like helping, Maddie and Cressley on like website and stuff, and then in like brand vision and stuff like that. And then she gets involved in the product strategy as well. And she's good at that because she's really good at research. And with her UX background, she like really thinks through the user experience of product, and the brand, is represented by its product. So, we're still, it's often that the two of us are in a product discussion meeting, and then I'll bring samples home, and it's like fun to go home and like chat about the product that I got, the prototype or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would say the amount of time that her and I spend talking about Dorai on a weekly basis is like no more than like 2 hours a week now. So it's not like overtaking our relationship. It definitely used to, which was a problem, right? And I think over time, as she stepped away and we've like figured out a new flow, like 2 hours of chatting about it, it's like now it's like more positive and fun than being like a stressful startup that we're trying to build together.
This has got to succeed, or we're sleeping.
I think it's naturally evolved and strengthened us. And then there's definitely like hard times emotionally, but at the same time, like, like it's been amazing at the same time.
I like how you said at the beginning, like, you guys are building a family together. Like, you guys are co-CEOs of a family. Like, so as difficult as that is, like, a business can't be as difficult. Like,
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, the thing is too, is that like, we're both very, like, she's very type A and a strong personality like myself. So you can imagine like I'm not type A though. Like, I'm not, she's very 110% all the way. And I'm like, oh, they'll figure it out. Let's move on to the next thing. But that's also an advantage because I counterbalance that, and then she counterbalances that. So I think there's a good balance there. But yeah, I don't know. What would be harder, building a family or a business? I don't know yet.
Yeah, I guess because
our son Wells is like 10 months old now, so it's like we still have a lot. We only have one kid, right?
Yeah,
I'm friends with two, and it's like, geez.
I have a 7 and a 3-year-old.
Yeah, so that's different at that point, right?
Yeah.
So
here's the last. Here's my last. Actually, this really is my last question. So I think you have really pretty eyelashes.
Thanks.
Has there ever been a
mom
time
always
where
told me
they've been chopped off or something?
Oh yeah, who told you that one? That's a funny story.
It's actually Katie. Yeah.
Oh, when I was like really little, I always got comments on the length of my eyelashes, and I think I was like maybe in like 3rd grade. Yeah, maybe like 3rd grade, and I trimmed them. Because my mom, or like my mom's friends and stuff, they'd always be like, "Look at your pretty eyelashes." And like,
you look like insane.
I mean, I trimmed them and they grew back longer. No way. Yeah. So they grew back longer.
Females listening,
isn't that funny? I've been noticing my son Wells's eyelashes are really long. He must have gotten that from me.
That's
so
awesome.
I'll make sure he doesn't trim them. But like a little 3rd grader with scissors, that could have been dangerous.
Yeah,
looking back at it. But
so they said that your mom, like at the babysitter at the time, she was like bawling her eyes out, like, "I'm so sorry." And
she freaked out. Yeah, I remember it. I remember the night when I showed him, because I just casually was like, look what I did. And I remember like the doctor, they were like, well, they either might not grow back or they'll grow back longer. And they grew back longer. So it was like, well, lesson learned.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
counterproductive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's, we're kind of running out of time. So
that's great.
Yeah, that's basically it. This was Unfiltered Ops. Thanks for stopping by.